Hello. I was thinking, and I was listening to something the other day where they asked somebody what their desert island books would be. And I forgot how many they gave them, but I think oftentimes I hear people say, like, you can pick 3 books or you can pick 5 books. And I decided to go with 4. Split the difference. It's a reasonable number of books to be allowed to bring somewhere. And if you know me at all, you know what this first one is going to be. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I've read it probably 12 plus times, and I think that I kind of get a little bit more out of it every time I read it. A lot of people say it's overrated, and I disagree. I think it's a really enjoyable read, but it's also just so intricately crafted. There's so much packed into that book that it almost, in the first reading or two, you almost miss the magic of it. I mean, I think it, in a lot of ways, it is a fantasy novel, which I will not be explaining here, but that would be my first pick, just because I think it's so rereadable, and it's, strangely enough, one of my feel-good books. The second one, probably for more practical purposes, I guess you could say. If you're on a island by yourself, you're going to need motivation every now and then, and it's sort of like a man versus nature situation. And so I'm going with The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I think this book does a lot of things in a very, very small number of pages, and it is sort of motivational in a way. You know, it's the story of this old man who's down on his luck, who's out at sea by himself. He's fighting against nature in the form of this marlin, in the form of the sharks, in the form of the weather, dehydration, all these things. He's fighting against them. And, you know, was it a man can be destroyed but not defeated, I think is the line. If I didn't swap those, it would be a real kind of good place to read it if you're by yourself on a desert island, to kind of get you through another day, kind of give you that extra little morale boost that you would probably need frequently. It's one of those books I've read many times, definitely not as many as Gatsby, but I've probably read this one 5 or 6 times now. It hits every time. I think it's important to note this is not the same thing as a favorites book list or the best books of all time or something like that. And so while I have read and loved The Hobbit and enjoy that a little more, or maybe a little more than The Lord of the Rings, I think I would take The Lord of the Rings with me. It's just, there's just a lot more to it. A lot of the other books I picked were, all the other books I picked were fairly short, and so got something like this that there's just so many different, like, you can read different chapters if you're in different moods. It is a journey. There's hardship involved, they're overcoming, and then there's just a magic to it that I think would be appreciated in a situation if you were on a desert island. Yeah, I think I want to tackle this one again soon. I've read it all the way through once, and I've read bits and pieces a few more times, but yeah. Lastly, I'm a big fan of poetry, and I think that having something more bite-sized that you can kind of pick up when you have a few minutes or kind of bounce around in if you have more time, I think it's a good thing to have, to kind of revel in the language. And one of my favorite poets is Ron Rash. These poems are fairly dark, and I had a professor that hated that word, dark. What does dark mean? And it's a fair point. What does dark mean? But I think there's just so much emotion and humanity in this collection. If you are by yourself, you're going to be missing out on that human connection, that humanity, and I think poetry can do a really, really good job of reminding you of humanity, especially with someone like Ron Rash, what I would call a blue-collar poet, poet of the working class. You know, it's not difficult poetry. He's using simple language, but beautiful language still, to kind of evoke some sort of feeling, but not in like a super sentimental sort of way. He's digging deep, and I think that would be an amazing thing to have with you if you were on a desert island. So those are the four that I would go with personally. I would invite you in the comments, or if you would like to make your own video talking about what 4 books you would bring if you were to be headed to an island by yourself with the knowledge that you were going to stay there. I'd be very interested to see what other people have to say on this. Comment below, subscribe, like the video, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll see y'all later.